Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Appreciate you listening to the program as always. Today our guest is Anat Weissman. She's from Israel. She educated in Kenya in a British school system. She's got a great story. Her company's called Connecting the Dots, and she has a great story about helping companies create a better customer experience by aligning the strategy from marketing all the way to customer support. And she tells great stories. She's got a great perspective, a lot of energy. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So Annette, welcome to the program. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day, since you're in Israel, it's the end of the day for you. So thanks for taking the time and jumping on with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity for me. Thank you.
So what I like to do is usually I have a guest on who's got a story, who's come from some place that is doing something that they probably didn't expect to do when they were a kid. They didn't think about what they're doing right now as a kid. Sometimes I'm wrong, but so can we jump off with your journey, how you got to where you are, your background a little bit?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting actually because, sometimes you get to a point and then you look back and you start realizing that what happened during the whole journey and how you got somewhere. So I actually, although I'm based in Israel and I'm Israeli, I was born here. I actually grew up in Kenya, in Nairobi in Kenya. And I think I was there twice with my parents. In a very young age, did my kindergarten and beginning of primary school. Then we came back to Israel, and then again, all my high school I did in Kenya. And I think looking back at it, the fact that I lived in such a multicultural place, so many different people, different cultures, different religions, different, everything. Gave me the opportunity, first of all, to be very accepted, to accept everyone around me, to be able to listen to different people. Sometimes you grow up in one place, you just know the people around you. And if I really jump back, and then, I went to the army, as you would do in Israel, and then, jumping back to where we are today, I think looking at my career, I don't think I've ever done a role that was in one domain. I've always done roles, first of all, in global companies, and secondly, that had a lot of, width and depth. So I always held roles that had to connect the dots in some way. It was never marketing or never sales or never customer success. It was just everything from everywhere. And even in 10 years ago, after deciding that I want to start working for myself, and I opened my own business. I remember I went to a coach or business coach, and I told her I have no idea. Companies say, "What's the logo?" I said, "I have no idea how to call my business." And she asked me, "What do you do best?" So I said, "I connect the dots." So she said, "Here it is. So just call it Connecting the Dots." Now there are a lot of businesses called Connecting the Dots, so I wasn't the first, but it really does.
Right.
It really does describe, in my view, what I bring to the table and what I do best. And I think that if we're coming back, to sales and businesses, I think along my career, I've always done these roles of working with, in multifaceted environments with a lot of people, matrix management, product sales, customer success, customer experience, holding very wide teams that always looked eventually, on the customer and on the customer journey. And the interesting thing about it is that for me, it was always looking back at how I actually got there, and that everything in my life, in a way, kind of brought me to this place, which I love what I do. So this is it. So yeah, Kenya.
So there's a there's a bunch there, so I want to go back and ask a couple of
Sure.
questions because the entrepreneurs that I speak to have their past informs what they're doing today, and it's really helped them identify their passion, right? And connecting the dots that helps somebody lean in and it's like, okay, what does that mean? So you can start to have a conversation with somebody. But in terms of Kenya, like, wow, like what you went to school there? Like I've never been to Africa, any spot in Africa. So can you help? I'm just curious as to what school was like there because I always look at culture from the people's, what they do, how they operate every day, the food that they
Mm-hmm.
eat. The religion plays a piece in that, in the culture. Like, what is that? What was that like? That had to inform your empathy and ability to get along.
So I think if I look actually look at the second time I was there because I was much more I was much more mature, and actually got there just before the age of 13, and I left after I was 18, which is many very substantial years while you're growing up. I think first of all, looking back, it was an amazing opportunity. First, put aside Israelis. I have great better English than than most people around here, at least with the accent, which is a good one. Secondly, asking about schools. So you have usually the foreigners that come in. You either have the option to go to a British school or an American school. I actually went to the British school. I completed the British system, A levels, O levels, and I was in schools that tight UK uniforms, British uniforms, skirts up to the knee. Very not similar to what's
Hmm.
going on today, or even in Israel when I was much younger. Um, and you find yourself really sitting in a class with Kenyans, with British people that were born in Kenya, with Italians, with Spanish people, with a lot of Indian people. And as a kid and as someone growing up, everybody looks the same, and everybody is your friend, and you get along, and and it's just fine. And I think the fact that I was in that situation, and then getting to the army in Israel and doing other stuff, it kind of got me into a place where I'm very patient. First of all, with people. Secondly, I don't see the differences between people. I really do not see. Anybody can come in front of me, and I don't see. And I think also understanding the different cultures. I actually learned to drink white wine at the age of 16 because I had an Italian boyfriend. Probably I wouldn't have
Mm.
learned that in other places. So I think that the fact that I met so many different cultures actually allowed me later in my career to be able to be very good in moving business forward with people, because how to work better with British people and how to work with Italians, and when you can actually talk, and what do you mean, what does a British person mean when he talks, and you have to listen sometimes between the lines and not just take it as it's
Hmm.
said. And I think it's always also helped me working with my teams, in that suddenly get into a call with different people, and they're born Israelis, raised Israelis, and the English is not always the best in class, and they don't understand the music, and I was actually able to to break that down for them in many places. Hey, he's not mad at you, or he's not unhappy, or he is unhappy, he's just not saying it, but you have to listen, and let's see how to work that out. So it's helped me a lot in sometimes in what I call the EQ side and the soft side of managing teams and working with a lot of different cultures, people, countries, and so on. So I think that is Kenya for me, now that I look at it. Um, and that's it. I thank my parents for allowing me that experience.
Yeah, I I think that's how I was looking at, like, your parents, maybe not as a 13-year-old woman, but it you weren't like this was you didn't think this was going to be great, but it really does inform how you learn to read people, learn to read between the lines, look at the nuance of what, and listen, right? Which is to me, one of the most important skills in sales is our ability to hear what's not being said, and pick up that body language. I had a call with a salesperson I coach, and I think we were 5 seconds in to the call, and I could say, like, yes, what's wrong? Like, there's something wrong. No, nothing. Nope. And she shared what was bothering her. It's a real personal thing that was on her mind, and if I had pushed through to try to do what I intended to do, it would have just been a terrible experience. And being able to sit in another culture with multicultural people around you, that you're all struggling with a language, that's a pretty cool experience. And I think here in the States, we do a absolute poor job, terrible job of teaching our children another language early, right? Because they should be learning it when they're 5, 6, 7 years old. We just expect everybody to speak our language, and I think that's a mistake because it makes it harder for us to go out into the world.
Don't get me going on how they teach English here in Israel. I see the kids that finish high school here. Really, they pretty do not know. They really do not know how to speak English. So and today English is such an important. It's like if I could relocate, I would do that just even for a year, so my kids would get better English, exactly like I have better English because I was abroad. But they start life here with very, very poor English, which is a big problem. And I agree with you that second language, whatever it is, has to be mandatory and high level in schools.
Yeah, and it should be something that you experience throughout your education level, right? My daughter studied French. She went to the International Academy, so she studied French there. And then she didn't really get the language until she went to France and had an exchange program. And she really got the nuance of, she could tell the difference between Brittany and Parisian accents, and how, you were, the different accents meant different things, just like it does in our country. A Southern accent means something different than a New York accent. So yeah, that's something that it really informs how you work with people, and connecting the dots is that piece that I think you really pulled that forward, and being able to work with teams and listen to them and understand. So let's talk a little bit about, I call it customer experience. I think you've referred to it a couple of different ways, but can we talk about how you work with teams that need to communicate better and listen better?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So I'll tell you, it's kind of a funny story, and to explain that, I'll just give you a minute of what I actually did in my previous role, because I hit that role as a freelance, and then I stayed, and I started actually doing what we call, I got a role that was called Director of Channel Development, because the company I worked for worked a lot with indirect, with distributors and stuff like that. And just in the first introduction conversation I had the day I came in, the chief customer officer told me, "Hey, there are two people here that are doing sales enablement. I have no idea what to do with them. Why don't you take them under your leadership?" And I said, "Well, okay, I'll do that." And very quickly, to run really quickly, I learned what it meant. I did it before, but I just didn't call it sales enablement. And very quickly, I understood that I'm sitting in headquarters, in Israel. All the sales team are dispersed globally, Americans, UK, Australians, Asia. And I have to find a way not to make them, not to be condescending in a way, but to try and start aligning some kind, of sales talk, of sales methodology. you have to scale up. You have to do that 70% that's aligned. There's a sales process, and then give them, um, that
Freedom.
yeah, the freedom for the culture differences, which is fine. Sometimes it's just different, but I had to come and build a whole work plan on how are we selling, and how do we move from product selling to solution selling, which requires talking and requires better conversation with teams, and requires to talk to a customer. And so you say something that the first reply is not just, okay, how much does it cost? No, I don't have enough money for that. Because we were talking about price points of, the lowest was like 300K, highest was probably around 700K. The conversation can end in 2 minutes if you don't do it the right
Sure.
way. And I think very quickly, I actually started working with an external company on that had there are quite a few around solution selling methodologies, but I took someone to help me that wasn't just a facilitator, but actually led teams. He was a facilitator at the time, but he led sales teams. So we got a lot around, and I think we did a lot of intro work on how to talk and what do we want our sales team to talk about with the customers, and how do we want to make the customers feel. Now, if I run a bit, quite kind of fast forward it, at one point I was leading the full sales enablement team, and I said, hey, but the sales is done. What happens then? They go on to customer success and service. And those people are not even getting, the same training, even on conversational side, even if they don't need to do any upselling. So I kind of took I persuaded management to give me all the team, the training team and the enablement team from the customer success. And I actually joined those two teams together. Now, there's so many people. I just had a post about this today on LinkedIn saying that these teams, the support teams, not the teams themselves, but the supporting teams have to be together. And I got so many people saying, oh, it doesn't work like that, ego in my view, because the consolidation has to happen. If the customer is one, you have to have one journey, one communication. Everyone that has their own style, that's fine, but you're selling one company's
Hmm.
services and products. Now, to make that even complicated, and because I'm a bit crazy and I have ADHD, so I need a lot of things around me all the time. At one point I said, hey, customer experience, which was one survey a year, is sitting somewhere in another team. I want to be in charge or build a strategy for customer experience in the company, because if I'm looking and supporting the full customer journey from marketing down to customer success, customer experience is not just customer success responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility. So I actually pulled that over to my team as well. So you can understand at one point I was holding a full view of the customer journey, and then we started breaking it down to what's relevant to all populations. How do we talk to them? How does the language move, across that journey? And by the way, today with AI, generative AI and stuff like that, you can do it even better, because you can just ask the chat to write, the same music in the messaging to different populations. So you can actually get that
Hmm.
across the board. And honestly, it was difficult, if that was going to be your next question.
Well, I think it's definitely difficult because you're fighting on a couple of fronts at the same time, right? You're fighting the egos and the people, like they want to keep their territory. I know better, right? It's kind of their idea, and then you're fighting the cultures within those in those various landscapes, right? Because people in Asia have a very particular way of going about business, and people in the East Coast of the United States do business very differently than in the South. British look at things in a completely different fashion. So you have to have that nuance. I love the idea of the 70%. These are the steps, these are the milestones we have to get through. How we do it can vary based on our personality and our own voice because it has to be
Hmm.
authentic. But we got to play. The analogy I use is tied to jazz music, where sometimes it sounds chaotic, but everybody's playing the same notes, and it's you get the sheet music, and then you go play it with your instrument, and it sounds beautiful,
Hmm.
but you're playing it authentically the way you would do it. So it would the way you would do it sound differently than the way I would, but if we hit all the right notes, the customer is going to have the same experience no matter what. And I think in a small company that's easier to accomplish, and then as those companies
Yeah.
grow and become multinational and multi-billion-dollar companies, they lose the they don't care. Like we have our cable company here, right? Is this
Hmm.
multi-billion-dollar company? They don't care if Walter's upset about something not working. I'm just one little
Hmm.
person in their dot. So bringing that back, trying to take control of that strategy. Yeah, I can imagine it was hard, and but that connecting those dots, if it's worth doing, it's probably not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy,
And the
but
sort of thinking there.
it's not easy. But if you'll ask me, I can tell you. I think I did a few steps that helped me in dealing with that. First of all, I accepted the fact that not everyone is going to like me. Let's start with that. I would hope that everyone would like me, but I knew that not everybody would like me. Secondly, I tried not to go in paths that I felt a lot of objection from the beginning. And I actually tried to choose places where I saw people that are communicating with me. We didn't have to agree about everything, but at least there was some kind of communication. Usually, what happened is that when we started showing ROI or we got to our KPIs, suddenly all the people that were objected started saying, "Hey, something is working there, so let's join the club."
What you doing over there? Yeah,
Yeah,
they're asking like,
exactly.
what's something's working? What are you doing? Yeah,
Exactly. The other
that's
thing I did was I really tried to build my team in a way that it's not all leaning on me, and but actually getting people that were domain experts in different domains that I thought were relevant to my team. And I actually managed managers that were leading full domains. So when I had, for example, a sales enablement lead, they led and they were responsible for the full sales enablement side. And when I had customer success, um, they were responsible from the beginning to the end. What I did, I actually was kind of the buffer between what's coming down from management and looking that everything is connected in a way and connecting it to the business because I had more transparency and visibility to what was going on. And in a situation like my team where you work really with product and marketing and sales and customers and partners, you really need also the ability in your leadership style to be able to be there for your team because there are a lot of ups and downs. Now, put on top of that I worked in my previous a role. I worked in a growth company and a Nasdaq one that's on Nasdaq as well. So everything was post Corona was really really quick. Everything was shooting. Sometimes in these company
hmm
situations, you do something and suddenly there is a change of heart and management and it just shifts. And people are working and you need to hold them in a situation where they're not like, oh my God, we just worked so hard and everything is going down the drain. So my role was keeping them engaged and providing them kind of that business acumen that they needed to do their work better and to provide them the skills and the support in the challenges they had with people. Now, I can tell you when we started, we came up to product people and we started telling them that, product presentation is great, but when you come to sales, you need to come with a sales presentation. you need to show the numbers. You need to show the case studies. They don't care exactly how the system works and, all the details. It has to be 70% the product plus 30% of their sales. And there was a lot of,
Right.
objection at that point. So when we started, we were a lot of in push mode all the time. We were like, we were like that team that shows up annoyingly in every meeting. And oh my God, those people who always have to say. I can tell you that it took us 2 years until we started being invited proactively to those meetings. And we became those people everybody wants in the room. And we were the people who were the go-to people. Hey, do you have all the information from the customers, from the survey on this product? I want to do this work. Can you help me understand what's coming in? What's going on? What do you think the trends are? So I was able eventually, together with my team, to create, a place which was kind of like a magnet in a way, which for
Hmm.
me, is an amazing achievement. And I think, I learned a lot from it on dealing with, with different people, and again, going back to Kenya and that education system and the fact that I met so many different people, I could completely see that reflected, back in a more mature way, but reflected back in my career,
Hmm.
which was, yeah,
In a business
yeah,
setting.
in a business setting, yeah.
Yeah, it's there's a certain amount of pig-headed discipline to keep moving forward with the strategy that you believe in, and getting people to slowly start to accept that it's not your agenda, it's the customer's agenda, it's the company's agenda, and then everybody else in the organization wins when we bring this customer along and they feel like they feel the same no matter who they touch in the organization. And it's really what you're creating,
Mm-hmm.
that small company feel. You're bringing that to the larger organization, and it's just so many folks fighting that
Yeah,
process. Like, I focus my development work in that smaller space for the reasons that you just described. It's very difficult, and I sometimes lack the patience
yeah.
to work with that corporate mindset
Mm-hmm.
of, like, I just got to get the quarterly number, I just got to hit the quarterly piece. We can do both. We can hit the number, and we can make sure that the journey of that for that customer is pleasant, is appropriate, and makes them feel like they want to come back.
Yeah,
And that's so much. And when they want to come back when they don't have to come back,
yeah.
right? That's the rub,
Uh,
to do that. And it sounds like that's
I
what
can
you're
just
able to
add and
do.
say that I always told my team, which is very hard because everyone has an ego at the end, and you always want to get credit for your work. But I used to tell my team, listen, for us to do our work, we need to check our ego out the door. The only problem is that you enter sometimes rooms that with so many people that have not checked their ego out of the room. And then there's always that, very, very thin line in where, you also have to do your work, but sometimes, you kind of, I don't want to, sweet things up. I think the reason many companies are not even putting those two teams together and are not looking, they like to say they're looking at the customer journey. They like to say that the customer experience is great. But it can, in my view, it's very hard for it to be great if it's not connected. And that connection creates it requires a lot of people with very, very developed EQ. And
Hmm.
EQ is sometimes things that is lacking to many people, I would say. And I think it's you have to be very, very patient, but assertive in these situations. And you also have to know that you'll fail sometimes, and it's fine. I didn't get everything I wanted, but I did manage to lead my team in through those challenges in a way that kept them like the highest engaged team in the company for many years. I mean, I have it in writing from the employee evaluation surveys. And from my
Well,
perspective, that was the best feedback I could receive for my work.
I mean, that is tremendous feedback when the people that you're leading feel empowered, they feel they have a voice, and I think that there's another element there that you, as you were describing it, conflict, healthy conflict, the ability to have disagreement in that conference room, right? And understand that that's important to be able to put that on the table, share it, be heard, and then there's somebody in the room that gets to make a decision, right? That's part of the process. But if everybody's heard, then they should be able to come back with whatever the decision is. They should be able to get on board with that concept, and and be fully onto it. You can't, like, general says go that way, and you can't decide to take your team that way. And that's a really difficult thing for most people because they're not used to the conflict idea. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, but I spent a lot of time in New York, and conflict isn't something that is hidden there, right? If you could have arguments with your boss, your waiter, your parents, or it was just normal, and you have to be professional. It has to be come from the right place. But if we don't have that healthy conflict, that EQ doesn't really settle in. And that sounds like something you help slowly, methodically keep moving that little piece down the board, that keep moving it forward.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely tried to do
So,
that. And by the way, even today, where I'm currently, I've reopened my consultation business, and working with different companies, and also writing a lot. I mean, I've been writing a lot on LinkedIn, and again, very similar to our conversation. I think everything I write and share is first very authentic. Secondly, I try and take a lot of business issues that I've dealt with in the past and give them kind of, a day-to-day and actionable, how would you deal with it? And I take a lot of things
mhm.
from my personal life and, write how that relates to customer experience, from, having an argument with my 7-year-old daughter that she doesn't want to have a shower. And what are my choices? Very similar to what happens when a customer calls, and you have to deal with them. You have to very quickly screen what options you have and what would be the results of each option and what is the experience you want to give him. So I generally, I try and get something very, in your at the level of your eyes, in your face, but in a good way, I would say. I did learn in a British system, so I'm everyone laughs that I'm Israeli, but I am very British. I have British, and I'm very polite, like British people, like most of them, and not all of
Yeah,
them.
they are very polite.
Yeah, not the ones watching football probably, but never mind. But let's not, talk
Yeah,
bad about yeah,
that's a separate beast.
separate, exactly. So I think, and that, by the way, that ability of EQ, I see it also today working with customers. When you come as a consultant sometimes, and you have to, it's easier in a way because I don't care. Like, I don't work with them. I have a project and I move forward, but. You're kind of looking from the outside, but trying to make an impact even in that situation. And it's interesting to see because people are people, and
Mm.
putting them in a room, they act differently whether you like it or not. So it's always interesting to look at these situations.
When you get people in a room, and it doesn't matter if they're all from the same company and same culture, it really comes to the leadership in that room as to what that tone is. And when the leader, if the leader wants people to be authentic and wants them to share what they're really thinking and be vulnerable, then that if that leader isn't willing to be vulnerable, isn't willing to be authentic, he or she's not going to get that out of the room, right? You have to be willing to give first as a leader to share that piece. I was working with a client last year, and they were struggling with the team not doing certain things, that not living up to their core values. And I'm like, you gotta represent, right? You have to be able to live that piece. So it kind of hit him right between the eyes. He started thinking about what he could do differently, and it took a minute. It took a few months for people to see consistency, but that whole dynamic changed when with what he was doing. He got everybody else to share what they were really thinking, and he talked about mistakes, so people were willing to, instead of burying their mistake, they were willing to talk about it.
You
So
have to be in the game. You have to be in the game. You can't just stay outside on the sides and just not play the game. Everyone has to see that you're playing the game, playing the same rules. Yeah, you're leading them and you're managing the team, but you have to be there with them. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And I think too many managers and leaders stay on the sidelines sometimes. And I
yeah,
think this is
100%.
because they may think that if they go and get their hands dirty, then nobody will look at them as a manager. And I think that's a trick in a way. If you believe you have that ability and you earn it in a way that you're part of the game, then people will go after you, even if you don't have a VP in front of your name or a director, and only someone said that you're leading them, or even if you're not officially leading them. But you have to get dirty.
You could take the reins. Yeah, you do. And if you're, with American football or American sports, there's an idea of, being sort of that quiet leader. And what that really means is like just going and doing it every day, going out, living it. And I don't think you need to have the VP title to be a leader. I've been a salesperson for a big chunk of my career, and I always looked at I was the CEO of my own little business, even if I was just the salesperson at the organization.
Yep.
And I just acted like I was representing my customers and advocated for them. That's how I've always thought about leadership. I don't need the title. I can just go do it. And sometimes that ruffled feathers. It's never been something I've been concerned about. My need to be liked is really not not all that important. I prefer to be respected
Yeah,
than to be liked.
I agree.
So, so I think that's a great conversation. There's lots of little nuggets there for our business owners and entrepreneurs. So if somebody heard something that they really wanted to dig into, is LinkedIn, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So LinkedIn would be the best way. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Love to have people join, and I love feedback from people, even if they don't agree. By the way, I prefer people who don't agree with what I write and have a conversation. So that's the best way. I have all my contact details there: email, phone, and I'm very communicative through the inbox. So that's the best way to get through.
All right, so we'll have that in your website in the show notes.
Perfect.
So let me land here where I always land. Do you have? I'm interested from an Israeli perspective about cigars, but do you have a relationship, past or present, with cigars?
Not really, not really. The only thing I can say is that it's not cigars, but my grandfather, who's not been with us for many years, used to smoke pipes. Like, I don't know if you call it same. Yeah, he had pipes, and he had, I think, until today, my mother has a huge cupboard full of pipes, which some of them are I think around 190 years old. Um, I
Wow.
can only say that I don't smoke at all, but I prefer a cigar smell rather than a cigarette smell. That's the only thing I can just say.
It's something weird. I, I, I don't care for cigarette smell at all. But if I'm walking down the street and I smell a cigar, it's like, hey, somebody's smoking a cigar. Like that, it's a positive
Yeah.
reaction. What's it? What's is there? Like the cigar culture in Israel? Is that something that's accepted? Is it shunned? Is it a
So
bad idea? Good
Yeah,
idea?
so I don't think, I mean, because I'm not so into it, but I do know there are a few shops around. Again, Israel is not such a big place, but there are a few shops here, definitely in Tel Aviv, that are kind of cigar places. There are a few kind of bars, that you would have kind of cigar, more of the cigar likers that go over there. And you do have, people smoking, in rare occasions. I can even tell you now that I'm thinking about it that even I have down here in the cupboard, now thinking about it, my partner in crime here is keeping a cigar, which seriously I have no idea how many years it is. Every time he says that, and he doesn't smoke usually, but he says, I will smoke this cigar in a very, very, interesting occasion. So I said, well, we've had so many interesting occasions. We've had our daughter born. Like, wasn't that a good enough occasion for that? So I'm really waiting to see when he's going to smoke that cigar. What has to happen in the world for him to smoke? We'll see.
Yeah, the birth of a daughter is a unique and special
Yeah.
day in a father's life. I know I literally remember the smell in the air, the temperature, what I was doing like that whole morning after she was
Yeah.
born. Um, it's burned into my brain.
Yeah.
And she turned 21 last week, so it's been a interesting little
Congratulations.
journey. So thanks. So let's land it there. I appreciate the insights. We'll have the in the show notes the ability for you to for people to reach out to you because I think there's some lessons learned
Mhm.
there that people can really go grab onto. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much for having me. Thank you very much.